Men are in crisis. Masculinity is dying. The human male species and everything that it represents is in utter turmoil. And if we don't do something about it, all the men will explode.
Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm.
Okay, maybe we can relax a bit there. But can we please just have an honest, objective, and unbiased conversation about this topic, though? Because this stuff...
You can't even be a fucking decent woman and not be a slut? Fuck out of here, bro. No, you dumb bitch. I'm not fucking insecure. I'm very secure in my goddamn confidence. I don't want to fucking wipe up no hoe.
And also this stuff...
Quite simply, men have been trashed for millennia. They've been trashed for a long time. Not all men, but a lot of men.
Though both those positions are inevitable, and I totally understand how they arise in a society where we need a binary, they are just too far on the margins and do little to advance what I'd hope is our collective goals as humans. And that's for all people to survive and to thrive and fulfill their God-given purpose. What we instead need to do is just be honest and acknowledge the fact that masculinity and manhood has always been and will probably always remain to some extent in a real crisis. For several generations, the men of various times would speak out about the supposed loss of manhood and masculinity, much like the same sort of fear-based arguments that you hear so many male advocates make today. Where are the men, they'd say, or the women are trying to take our place and men aren't standing up and being men. And if those things sound familiar to you, it's because they truly are nothing new. This is because no matter the social issues of the day or era that we're in, the thing that is consistent is that it is difficult to be a man. Quite frankly, all human consciousness is difficult, considering the beautiful pain that is consciousness. However, there is no denying that manhood and masculinity and all that it entails socially, as well as some of the biological inclinations that it comes with, have their own level of difficulty that must be addressed and at a minimum acknowledged. Why, you may ask? Because pop culture and the way we've collectively engaged with this subject has just been wrong. Culture wants so badly to pit men and women against one another as if we are in a state of oppression Olympics. There is no doubt that there is some inequities in how we are treated and how the world engages with gender. However, men are not the enemy to women, nor are women the enemy to men. We are complementary to one another's existence here on this planet, thus we must learn to coexist healthily. And we can't do that so long as we don't understand one another. So let's start this understanding of one another journey with masculinity and manhood today. We'll delve into all things manhood and masculinity and answer the age-old questions. Why are men in crisis? And what can we do about it as a collective societal family? And most importantly, why do women claim to feel more safe around a bear than they do men? All right, let's hop in. Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, welcome. Clap it up for you coming into the bastion of critical thinking. I'm trying to encourage and invoke a culture where we do that more. I don't want us to just be consumers of thought, but I want us to be contributors of thought. And so in saying that, you've entered into a video series that we like to call Critique and Reform. And basically what that is we delve into different factions of pop culture. We offer thoughts of critique because obviously there are ills within parts of pop culture that we need to really be honest about and address. But then also we don't just critique because we don't just hate from outside the club, but we get into it, we delve deep into it, and we offer ways to reform it and bring solutions to it, because we never want to critique and offer criticisms without being able to lend a hand up and help to improve it in some ways, because this is also the world that we all have to live in. And so we want to contribute to it in the best ways that we can. So with that in mind, the faction of popular culture that we will be delving into today is called... For the sake of this video, I want to provide you with all the necessary disclaimers up front so as to ensure that we are all on the same page as we have this what some can consider difficult conversation. Okay? Disclaimer 1. The nuances of gender and sexuality aren't consequential to my arguments that I'll make here. Not because I don't recognize or acknowledge that there are nuances in the gender and sexuality conversation. However, this video is not one that is implying that if you don't behave or see yourself in the ways that we've traditionally understood masculinity, then you are somehow wrong or made incorrectly. This video is simply taking an in-depth look at biological inclinations that have contributed to our understanding of traditional masculinity and its implications on manhood and what it means to live that out as a man, right? So basically, if the shoe doesn't fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are invalid or that you were made wrong, right? But it also doesn't mean that people and society's historical compelling toward traditional masculinity is just inherently wrong either. Now, I want you to pause it there and rewind it if you have to make sure you get what I am saying. If the shoe doesn't fit, there are a myriad of reasons why that may be, and that is okay. But that doesn't mean that society has just been totally wrong in their approach to manhood, okay? Okay, cool. Now, disclaimer 2. Masculinity in the way that I am defining it in this video does in fact include traditional understanding of manhood and masculinity, but not because I think the evolution we've made in our understanding and approach to gender expression is necessarily bad, but rather we can't throw it all out, relegating our mistakes that we've made in the past with gender or in this space to relegating it to completely being wrong altogether. I think that's far too dismissive of some of the beauties of our design and our creation, right? And some of those biological inclinations that we just can't dismiss. Okay? These disclaimers will also all make sense in due time. So let's just hop right into the video. First things first, masculinity will always be in crisis. And that sounds much more grimace than what I intend to, so let me keep going. Men traditionally feel a compelling towards protection and provision and dominion and innovation. And obviously there are cultural factors that play a part in that and thus creates nuances there. But ask the average man his thoughts around his family or other people that he cares for, and he'll probably share thoughts akin to feeling a strong urge to fight for, protect, and provide for them. And this is not exclusive to men, I want to be clear, but there is no denying that they feel it in unique ways, right? And now the way that this has manifested in our society throughout history is that men are the ones who go out and make money and provide for the home. And again, regardless of how you feel about this manifestation or the social nuances of it, this is the reality. It has been the reality for decades. And both men and women to some degree have collectively felt a general compelling towards this way of being. And I'm just not convinced that it's solely because of social engineering. I'm sorry. But nevertheless, because I'm not about to die on that hill right now, because men have felt this compelling both biologically and socially, it has created a great deal of difficulty for them to cope with this reality. So when I say men will always be in crisis, it's because no matter the time frame, no matter the era, having to grapple with the truth of being the provider and protector of a family on top of being socially respected among other men and presenting as if you are together and capable and strong, that's a lot. And enough to make a man digress and retreat from it altogether.
Have you had any chance to work which you've turned down since you came to St. Louis?
No, sir, I haven't turned down any jobs.
What would you take? Would you take any job?
At the time I would.
You have people to support, family?
Wife and 2 children.
Do you think somehow you're going to get some work soon?
I don't know.
Simply from the weight of the pressure of it all. I get that. I mean, I get it as much as I can, right, as a woman. Now, what of all the other reasons that people say men are in crisis? Because it's obviously just not about grown men who are struggling to pay bills. Because I recognize that boys are failing in school as it relates to girls, and then girls are just outperforming them by leaps and bounds. And then also suicide rates are astronomically high with young boys and men altogether. But why is that though? That's a hard truth to grapple with. So why? Honestly, there is no easy answer to this. But what we can unequivocally say is that the reasons we've attributed to it as a culture are dead wrong and so intellectually lazy. For Harriet did a wonderful breakdown of this on her channel, so you guys ought to go check it out. But one of the things that she pointed out that I loved so much and that really evolved my thoughts about this topic is that boys' failure in school can't solely be blamed on an educational system failure, because it's always been set up this way. And the only changes that have happened to it in modern history has been that we've added girls into the equation. And now girls have been required to perform well in the same educational space that the boys have been asked to do. And as soon as the boys aren't doing so great in it, then we are compelled to make changes to the standards and what we expect from the children. Now, I think that's too short-sighted. However, though, I do like what Richard Reeves talks about in his book Of Boys and Men. And it's a great book that delves into this divide that we're talking about and offers solutions on what can be done to help boys. The truth is, we've added girls into the equation, and we've seen that under the current educational system that we have, girls simply outperform and perform better as they are better suited to do so in the current confines of how our educational system is built. And so as we continue towards progress and equity within our society, we have to keep striving to get it right. So if boys are failing, it is our job to find out why and address it, because no woman even wants a man who isn't at least commensurate with her in regards to his performance in the world or in performance and productivity in general. So for the continuation of our society, it really is in all of our best interest to address this issue. However, in full acknowledgement that we have a responsibility to keep moving towards progress in this area, there still is no denying that it'll always be a problem, and one that will make the cultural critics raise their eyebrows and worry that the boys are quote unquote in crisis, right? And this is because we still have to be honest about the fact that boys and young men struggle with identity, because so much of their identity and their markers of growth and maturity is rooted in performance and external factors. Let me break that down because I want to make sure you guys get what I'm saying. With girls, so much of their identity is rooted in biological markers, right? Things like a menstrual cycle, development of breasts and hips. And each of these things are indicators that a little girl is now moving towards womanhood, right? And she doesn't necessarily have to prove it because it's externally seen, right? And really just can't be denied no matter what a person says. However, that's not necessarily true or the same for boys. Boys have no real external biological factors that distinguish them from boyhood to manhood. Although they do feel innate things in the same way that girls do, that it's still a difference externally. So what that means is that their crisis is that they are always in a state of trying to define and prove their manhood and masculinity, even to themselves. Although I am not a man, I can't imagine how difficult and disorienting this must be, because what it inherently means is that they have to work for the right to be seen as a man. They have to work for their right to be seen as a potential sex partner even as they get older. Imagine that. Having the sexual drive and prowess and energy that a man has, especially a young man, but not being seen in that way or taken seriously in that way because you have yet to prove yourself. But you don't even know the first thing about how you should go about trying to prove yourself, because how you're supposed to be and what it means to be a man is really just kind of left up in the air. And this especially happened as we automated and reformed our societies to become more equitable and equal. On one end, you see a bunch of images and stories of men being these horrible people who only cause death and destruction and confusion into the world. And then on the other end, you see images of men, and maybe you experience yourself being pushed around and weak, and that doesn't really serve you either, right? Or who you want to be. And then on top of all of that, no one in your inner circle or around you has a man around you to help you navigate the complexities of it all. And if they do, because many times though there are men in boys' lives, right? But the same men are struggling with the same sort of inner battles, which make them like almost incapable of helping these young men, as they are still seeking and internally longing for help themselves. And you can add on top of all of that, men are petrified and literally find it impossible to voice these struggles out of fear of being weak or dropping the ball or being perceived as dropping the ball. And heaven knows they can't do that, right? And contrary to popular belief, that's not an automatically horrible thing either. Obviously, we want men to voice their struggles and to have spaces where they can openly talk about the difficulties of manhood and the carrying of the weight and burdens of responsibilities that they carry. We want them to be open about that. However, that doesn't take away the responsibility for them to have to show up and do it. There is a modicum of manhood that is solely about strength and standing up when everyone else is too afraid to do so, and taking difficulties on the chin and pushing past what you feel to do what you know is required. That's just the truth that we can't deny. And we can pretend like that's not true all we want. But the fact of the matter is, it is. And men know that it is. And they feel it deep within themselves. And no matter how much we tell them to create community and that it's okay to cry, and it's okay to go to therapy and to reach out when you need something, and even telling them to communicate your feelings, please talk more, and all the other things that we encourage men to do, and we should, so that we can all continue to evolve as a society. That truth will never not be there. Men feel a compelling to stand up and take responsibility because they are designed that way. And many of them fail because the pressure and the weight of the responsibility is simply scary. And it feels like it's just too much to bear. It's not, but a lot of them feel like it just is. And going back to that school piece and why they feel so much there, and even in life, it's the same thing. It's because men are driven by sensation and instant gratification and action and things like quick solutions. And so many of them allow that to take over their fundamental thinking. And later they realize that choosing that route left them feeling hollow and still is never enough. Never fully identifying how and what it takes for them to feel whole and to feel as if they're doing it quite right. In The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, she talks a lot about patriarchy and the ways that it doesn't serve men. And although I am sympathetic to a great deal of her thoughts and work, I fundamentally disagree with her solution to fixing the struggles that patriarchy has presented to our society, particularly men. In the book she writes, the patriarchal manhood that was supposed to satisfy does not, and by the time this awareness emerges, most patriarchal men are isolated and alienated. She goes on to say that most men find it difficult to be patriarchs. This is obviously true, right? That's why I say men will always be in crisis. But what I think Hooks fails to acknowledge is that a large part of the patriarchy is biologically driven. And there are errors, of course, that have manifested because humans are flawed and driven by a sin nature that drives us to selfishness and oppression of others at times. However, men don't feel a compelling to leading and being heads of households solely because they were told to do so and just because they want to rule and lead and dominate and destroy people. Obviously, there is a modicum of that, but generally speaking, they don't feel compelled to it just for these horrible reasons. But it's because, generally speaking, heteronormative men and women are drawn to certain characteristics that are innate to how we function, and they complement one another. It's not accidental you're seeing videos all over the internet about women being at the airport or out with the guys that they're dating, and they have no care in the world, while men are calculating in their minds about the exits and keeping their woman safe and all the other things it takes to be out and keep him and her safe.
2 exits to the left, my nearest exit is still in front of me. My guy looks kind of suspicious. Make sure he doesn't get too close to her.
Make my way downtown, walking fast, this person home.
When we relegate the patriarchy, if you will, to just this academic concept that has brought significant social ills and harms to our society, we dismiss the fact that a significant amount of how our society functions with regard to gender is merely a manifestation of how we are wired. So the bottom line is, we have to acknowledge that a dismissal of traditional masculinity also means a dismissal of many of the benefits and beauty of God's design for both men and women. Is there room for expansion about our ideas of manhood and masculinity? Yes, of course there are. Because as we evolve and educate ourselves, we can acknowledge that we've gotten a lot wrong and caused a great deal of harm to a lot of people. But what's the old saying? You don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Men and boys are shooting up schools, not because they are men or because masculinity is this inherently bad thing that we have to rid ourselves of. And I know how we can arrive at that school of thought, so I'm not shaming. And I also get how some women genuinely believe that they are safer in a forest with a bear rather than with a man. But I'm sorry, guys. That's not because men are these horrible alien creatures that need disposing of. And so it also doesn't mean that traits that are traditionally associated with men are inherently bad either. All that it means is that we need a reform of not only how we view manhood and masculinity, but how we channel it. Society's changed and the world became more automated, stripping away the external markers that many boys and men could use to assert and align their manliness with and their masculinity with. Workplaces and our means of production became more centered around things women generally succeed more in, right? And that's not a bad thing. Hooray for the elevation and evolution we've made in our society. However, that doesn't mean that strength and aggression and even dominance in some instances are bad traits. We just have to reform and re-envision how we engage with them. We need systems that affirm boys' makeup, biological makeup, not punish them for not being more like girls. Masculinity and testosterone are beautiful gifts from God that have no doubt civilized the world in significant ways, and it's no sense of denying that because of the harm that they've also caused people in civilization. You can acknowledge that and still acknowledge and be so grateful for men at the same time. Nevertheless, unchecked and undisciplined masculinity and testosterone can and too often has consumed and destroyed the man that houses those very traits and consequently everyone around him. So our job as a society is to help create spaces for men and boys to harness those traits and bring them under subjection to God to be used for His glory. Continuing to raise men and boys with the idea that they are inherently bad or even under the impression that they are inherently better simply because they are men is a dangerous precedent, and it leaves us all susceptible to the power of unfettered, unchecked testosterone. Let's love our boys into courage and discipline and accountability, not continuing to give them reasons of why they don't have to rise to these requirements, but rather remind them that they are built and designed to show up to a challenge and conquer it. Pop culture is getting it wrong, guys, but we can absolutely, on an individual level, get it right. All right, guys, that's all that I have for this video. I could have said so much more, but I hope the essence of what you got here is that there isn't anything wrong with traditional masculinity. Maybe how we executed it is wrong, but we can actually absolutely bring reform to it. And we shouldn't fall for the narratives that pop culture is trying to force upon us, that men and women somehow have to be pitted against one another if we're going to function as a society, because the truth is that won't get us anywhere but to further destruction, right? And it helps no one. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about all of this. And until next time, I'll see you in the next critique and reform video. Later.